So what is it that you currently do?
I'm a full-time mum.
Okay, full-time with how many children do you have?
2 children.
Two children,
Two
and the
boys.
ages?
4 and 2.
So that is definitely full-time.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened when you initially went out on this path and made you seek some different type of information?
My eldest son Joshua was born at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, and
Right.
the midwife there recommended that if you were going to have an assisted delivery, to go
Okay.
and see a cranial osteopath after the baby was born. And Joshua was assisted with forceps, so I went to see Craig when he was 2 weeks old.
Well, so what does assisted mean? Like, just so I get an understanding of what that
An
is.
assisted delivery is, so von-2s or forceps,
Right.
basically any physical intervention helping get the baby out,
Wow.
because it can interfere obviously with their skull.
Yeah. And how many, is it quite common for babies to be assisted to when they're born?
I think it is, yeah.
Oh,
I
right.
don't know the stats, but yes.
Okay. And so what did you learn when you were with Craig? What are some of the big things that you took away and made you have a different perspective on the way you looked at health?
Well, it's been quite a long journey. I mean, that was 4 years ago that I first went, so I've
Right.
learnt lots of different things on the way. Because it started off with learning more about my baby initially, and
Right.
not being frightened of him. You know, he's
Yeah.
a poor helpless little thing, and
Right.
babies cry, and sometimes there is no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
But not to be frightened by that, which I think when it's your first,
Mm.
you kind of, we're used to knowing what to do, and we're used to learning quickly how to do things, and when
Yeah.
it doesn't work easily, it's quite a knock for your confidence.
Mm.
So just being more comfortable with him and learning little things of what to do, and when it came to weaning, what to feed him. And
Right.
one of the biggest things I've learned is understanding the link between nutrition and health,
Yeah.
and what I feed my boys
Mm.
makes a big difference
Yeah.
as to the illnesses they get, and how quickly they recover.
Yeah. Like compared to other people's babies, do you compare that way or?
Yeah, for instance, a lot of children, particularly in the winter, have snot
Right.
dripping out of
Yeah.
their nose all the time. And lots of mums just say, well, you know, it's normal, they're a baby and it's winter, but I don't think it is normal.
Yeah.
And my boys, unless they've got a bad cold, they don't have
That's
permanent
interesting.
runny noses. So there's little things like that.
Just to go back to something you said before, was there a lot of fear initially when you're having your first baby?
There is not when I was pregnant.
Okay.
I wasn't frightened in advance because I had a very easy pregnancy. I was very lucky.
Right.
And as first-time births go, it wasn't bad. The fear slightly came in because you didn't know what to expect, but actually it was fine. It was pretty much a natural birth, except I was helped with forceps at the end. But yeah, it's then having this baby and sort of having the baby blues, so getting very emotional,
Right.
having had this baby, and I always used to think I was quite an even-tempered person.
Right.
And it knocks you for six, and you're just not expecting it, and you don't know that it's normal. You feel like you're the only person who's ever had a baby. And my husband and I did, you know, when our son was crying, just sort of think, you know, what can we do now? We've changed his nappy, we've fed him, you know, we've cuddled him, and he's still crying. And there are sort of fearful moments, but another thing I have learnt is with children everything's a phase, and it will finish at some point, which is really nice to know when you're in a really tricky one.
So similar patterns obviously, so from when you have your first baby and your second baby you have more of an understanding of how long it'll last for, how to treat them in certain situations. Like
but you just don't get so worked up about it.
Right, okay.
Which I'm sure helps them not get so worked up
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
So,
so you mentioned your husband before as well. How has he dealt with this? Because, you know, mothers are a lot more nocturnal, and with a male, I mean, it must be really frustrating in their position. So what kind of support did he have initially, and how was the journey for him?
He was brilliant because he's got a stepbrother who was 10 years younger than him.
Okay.
So he, when he was growing up, was very used to dealing with quite a small baby.
Right.
So actually he was fantastic. He didn't get as worked up and anxious. I think that's the difference. I was much more anxious and sort of fearful, and my husband was much more, you know, just go with the flow. This is what happens. You know, it'll be fine. And also very good support for me emotionally, because I was all over the place.
Well, I think male and female would balance each other out a lot, because especially the female's a lot more emotive, and the male can balance it out, I'm sure. So that would really help.
Yeah. I think longer term though, it's interesting. I think although men are deeply emotionally involved with their children, there is a difference. They don't have that same constant connection, and as a result, I find definitely it's taken him much longer to adjust to a new life with children. Whereas for me, I suppose it's happened more easily because I'm so wrapped up in it. You know, I don't go to work every day.
Yeah.
So I don't have that problem of sort of trying to adjust. So it's not so hard.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So what are some of the biggest things you could take away and recommend for other people that are in a situation that are just about to have a baby, and you know, they may be very fearful at this moment?
Well, for me, it's having support, whether it's your partner or I've got an older sister who I spoke to a lot,
Right.
and also having an osteopath who you can talk to about anything, and I've also used a homeopath as well.
Okay.
And it's sort of having that network around you that you feel you can ring up and ask, even if it feels like a foolish question, and they won't judge you, and it's absolutely fine. And for me particularly, you know, I do use my GP and I do take children there when they're ill, for instance.
Right.
But having Craig and my homeopath on the phone is just an alternative route that I really like, because I don't like going down the antibiotic route, for instance.
Yeah, okay.
You know, it's having a support network around you, and it doesn't have to be family or professionals, it could just be friends,
Yeah.
you know, who are in a similar situation maybe.
So what kind of things does Craig do, just so you get an understanding of what you know, people are recommending him? So what does he actually do with the baby?
Well, it depends. Sort of the cranial osteopathic work could be more realignment, which, when you're very unfamiliar with it, looks, you know, you might think, oh, he's not really doing anything. He seems to just be holding the baby's hips or cupping the baby's head. But it's all about sort of realigning everything that's, you know, inside. But also Craig has other sort of strings to his bow in terms of he's an acupuncturist and a naturopath, so he knows about nutrition.
Yeah.
And for me, it's that holistic approach. So it's not just going to be cranial osteopathy. It's not just going to be dealing, you know, with the alignment of the skeleton and everything else. It's sort of there's more to it. That's what I find most helpful.
So initially, if someone was to look at this, doing that physical thing, they can probably understand that, and it's just actually, that's the start of the journey, isn't it, from what you're saying? And then it starts opening up these other doors and going, well, this is what I'm doing physically with my hands, or aligning the baby, but these are the other things. And so it's an education process, isn't it?
Yeah, and also what Craig's good at is supporting the mother.
Right.
Because babies do feed off us, particularly if you're breastfeeding, they're obviously feeding from you, but also emotionally. And so that's how I kind of carried on with Craig, is that he did a lot of stuff with my eldest son initially, but then we looked at me, because I was at moments definitely finding it quite hard, and so sort of boosting my sort of emotional levels and nutritional levels.
Yeah. So how did you find him actually being a male in that situation, that you were looking at someone to be supportive in that nature, and he was a male? Was that ever a concern?
Funny enough, no, because he's very natural with the children.
Yeah.
I have to say I love the fact that he's now had a little baby of his own.
Yeah.
Because it does. He's a very sort of empathetic person, so he can sympathise with you.
Right.
But now I feel he really understands. You know, when you're being driven by your emotion, which I know you shouldn't be, but sometimes you are.
Oh, of course, emotions are so strong. Yeah.
I think he kind of probably understands that a bit more, or it feels to me as if he does, because I think if you haven't had children, it's very hard to really understand that.
Yeah.
But no, the fact that he was male didn't bother me.
So, you know, from what you've learnt in the journey you've gone on and the kind of insights you've had, would you recommend his services to other women out there?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I have done to friends.
You have done, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But I also would recommend that you don't go to him for a quick fix.
Yeah.
You know, you don't go just for 1 or 2 appointments, but actually you see it as a long-term investment, and you maybe go, you know, for an initial consultation and talk to him about your needs, but don't then just leave it at that.